Hello everybody, welcome back to Terra, and today we're going to be taking a look at some community questions. YouTube has quite nicely added a community tab. I'm going to go through the questions I've gotten recently. I haven't seen all of these before, I should say. I put them together just before this, so I'm going in largely blind, but I think that'll make this pretty funny. Good afternoon, Sandman. I just finished the book Fulgrim and I loved it. I have now read all of the first 5 books. Would you recommend I stay the course and read the rest of the Horus Heresy in order, or do you think it'd be best to skip the books like Descent of Angels? I know you love this book and I just like an opinion. Yeah, so this question hurts me a little bit as a Dark Angels fan, because basically the first 5 books of the Horus Heresy are superb, and they are either books that take place sequentially or kind of at the same time, and they interweave, and characters in one book appear in the next book, and it's all really nice. And then book 6 takes you to the Dark Angels storyline, which I like as a Dark Angels fan, but objectively it's a bit of a left turn. I mean, not even a left turn. It's you've just teleported from one road to another road, so it's a bit discombobulating. I think that's the first time I've used that word on the channel, and I can get why people often will skip that book if you're not particularly interested in the Dark Angel storyline. Everything kind of ties together in the end. So like by the time you get to the Siege of Terra, the Dark Angel stuff comes to fruition. But if you're not particularly interested in the Dark Angels, many people just skip it and make do. And to be honest, I don't really hold it against you. So the thing is about the Horus Heresy is it is a big mess. They never intended for it to be as long as it was. They never thought that it would be as big a phenomenon as it ended up becoming. And when they wrote a lot of these books, they kind of were just hoping to tell random stories from the heresy at the start. And then it just grew and grew and grew, and now became a whole kind of relatively cohesive storyline. So given that it's got such a big, like, yeah, it goes all over the place. Like, you know, you're switching between legions after this point pretty regularly. Then you can jump around pretty frequently, and it's not necessarily a bad idea, because of course you're doing this for fun. You're doing this to have a good time. And so at the end of the day, read the books that you'll find most interesting. In terms of the books that are, I need to put together like a list at some point, but in terms of the books that are like genuinely, I'd say super important, that you kind of must read from the heresy, well, Games Workshop has got their list now. So after Fulgrim, probably the next book I'd say you kind of have to read, I'd probably say Legion is a really good, important one. I'd say you should read that. I would say actually you should read Mechanicum, because you'll always have the question of what on earth is going on Mars the entire time of the heresy. And then you've got 1,000 Suns, then First Heretic, then, anyway, let's just do the whole list. Prospero Burns, then Deliverance Lost, No Fear, Fear to Tread, Angel Exterminatus, Betrayer. I don't want to just skip the anthologies now that I do this. Oh, man, yeah, it's hard not to just skip the anthologies, isn't it? Problem is, all the anthologies are boring. Vulcan Lives, and Unremembered Empire, Scars, Vengeful Spirit. There you go, Damnation of Pythos. You can skip that one too. You know what? Let's just skip all the Salamanders books from here on out. You'll skip Deathfire, War Without End, read Pharos, read Path of Heaven, Angel of Caliban, Praetorian of Dawn, Master of Mankind, and then, you know what, script Crimson King too. I don't really find that interesting. Ruin Storm I would read. Yeah, and then we'll skip Old Earth. And then yeah. See, you could skip Wolfsbane in theory. It's just kind of a good book. And then Slaves to Darkness. And then finally, for some reason that list is missing the last book of the series, Buried Dagger. So yeah, and then you're into the Siege of Terra. So there you go. There's a list roughly. Maybe I'll have to rethink that at some point and come with an actual organization. The problem is, like I say, is you need sort of an org chart. You know, you need, if you care about Blood Angels, you'll read Fear to Tread. If you don't care about Blood Angels, Fear to Tread, I mean, maybe you want to read a passage of Erebus getting flayed. You know what? Everybody should read Fear to Tread. I changed my mind. Everyone should read that one. It's sort of all over the place. So yeah, it's very much up to you, but jumping around is not weird. If you do find yourself jumping ahead in the heresy or jumping to the siege, as some people will do, then there'll be some things that are confusing to you, but you can kind of have a Google, you can message me, or you can comment and be like, what's this? Who's this random blood angel on Terra? What does he mean? You know, you can do that kind of thing, and that will make sense. But yeah, you can kind of make it work. Anyway, next question. Where were we? High Fleet Leviathan went to great lengths to devour Baal. Thankfully, they failed. Do you think they wanted Sanguinius's DNA, or can you think of any other reason? Also, by stopping him, do you think the prophecy of Sanguinius is null and void? So, good questions. Great questions. So, to be fair, it depends what prophecy that you mean, because there are two prophecies of Sanguinius that are relevant to that question. The first is the prophecy of the Golden Warrior, and the second is he does foresee the Tyranids coming. I can't remember if that prophecy has a name, but it probably is called the prophecy of encroaching horribleness. And so, yeah, the first prophecy is the prophecy I would guess you're thinking of the prophecy of the Golden Warrior, which is the prophecy that Dante himself is concerned with. So, in mainly Devastation of Baal, Commander Dante believes that he might be a legendary warrior that Sanguinius had foreseen, a prophecy of the Golden Warrior. And the reason this is sort of controversial in the lore is because, understandably, a lot of people think that the Golden Warrior was supposed to just be a reference to Sanguinius himself, because Sanguinius wore golden armor, and Sanguinius, as the prophecy foretells, will be the, you know, basically stood between the Emperor and Doom in a way, because he fought Horus before Horus fought the Emperor. And so for Dante to think that actually the Golden Warrior applies to him, and this is a prophecy about him being the Emperor's kind of final guardian, final warrior, is kind of arrogant. And so Dante doesn't share this belief with other people, but he does fear that the prophecy applies to him, and therefore he mentally is preparing to basically, you know, sacrifice himself one day in defense of the Master of Mankind. The other prophecy you might be thinking of, Adia, is Sanguinius does, maybe I can find the passage. Yes, okay. Yes, so in the book Dante, they have a prophecy where Sanguinius does foresee the Tyranids coming. So there shall come to pass days of great darkness, when mankind is diminished, and all the lights of the world shall be extinguished, and the final scraps of hope torn away. I dreamed I was upon a plain of black sand, studded with diamond stars. In the dream there was a great hunger that pervaded all time and space, a more terrible and consuming appetite than the thirst that dogs my sons. It rose from the east of the night, and swallowed the moons of Baal that coursed across the unfamiliar sky. Before Baal Secundus was consumed, a bright light flashed upon it and sped away, outpacing the shadows. The hunger spread rapidly, bloated by its meal of my home, fortified by the blood of Baal. The formless hunger took shape, becoming a ravenous dragon that consumed the stars in great mouthfuls, until the only light was the memory of their glory, trapped in the diamonds of the sand. As the last star was eaten, the hellish octave of the traitors burned through the western sky, writ in fire on the starless void. Then this too went out, and I was alone in the dark. Shadows swelled and parted, the vision lost its disguise of metaphor, and I looked upon a scene that may be a true echo of the future. I saw my father, ruined, broken. I knew it was him, though his body was little more than a corpse, for I could feel his mind. His power was much reduced in potency, and I could feel no sense of consciousness there, merely raging, ungoverned power that threatened to obliterate my sleeping mind. This living corpse of my father was trapped in machinery that fed his soul the essence of others. I do not know if I should commit this to paper. Even in my private writings, he cannot ever know of this fate, if he does not already, or is he aware, and makes this choice between that life and death, and the utter destruction of mankind. If so, my respect for my father grows. So I'm guessing this is this could be what you're referring to, Adia. This other prophecy where Sanguinius did foresee that one day Baal would be attacked by the Tyranids. The Tyranids, very famously, very hungry, so it makes sense that that's what Sanguinius is referring to. And perhaps that is a prophecy that has now been turned aside. Prophecies in Warhammer 40k are not necessarily always set in stone. Of course, the Dark King, probably the most famous one, was said to rise, and then he didn't, and that prophecy has now been like pushed back, as it were. So perhaps Sanguinius' prophecy has also been pushed back, and the Tyranids will one day try and take Baal. But to answer the other part of your question about whether they were after Sanguinius' blood, could be. It's definitely possible, and Warhammer 40k has long had
that in the lore where it's the Tyranids didn't properly develop psycho bugs until after they devoured a bunch of Eldar and Eldar Farseers, and then you've got things like biovores and spore mines being equivalents, like kind of like to orcs and grots or something like that. You know, there's lots of speculation as to what goes on. So in theory, if they devoured Primarch blood, they could use that to create some pretty tasty bugs. But I think, if anything, and perhaps more scarily really, is the fact that they probably just wanted to destroy the Blood Angels because the hive mind is smart enough to understand how important the Blood Angels are in the defense of mankind's realms, which is also a pretty terrifying thought that they actually understand this. So yeah, yes and no, I guess, but yeah, really good question. You need to make another alert of random character is actually a Omegon / Alfarius. It's getting out of control. Yes, that could be a good use of an alert. You might have a point. I guess the only one that really bothers me, and I'm guessing you too, given your affinity for the Dark Angels, is Cypher, right? I really don't like the Cypher is actually Omegon plot like theories that people come up with. They suck. Okay, firstly, you know, Alpha Legion fans, get your own lore. Like, stop trying to steal other people's lore. But also the identity of Cypher and who Cypher is at the end of the heresy, or at least the destruction of Caliban, is a storyline that has been built up over decades. It is such a large storyline. You're talking like about a dozen books feeding into this. I can't really make the case that like there's any reason that you wouldn't want Cypher to be one of the Dark Angels, other than you haven't read the books and it sounds kind of cool to you. So realistically, you know, book fans, I can't like Omegon and Alfarius are their own thing. Like, they have all of this lore to unpack, and the idea that you would just want to say, oh, they're actually Omegon, you know, Omegon is actually Cypher, it's so lame. It's just, I think it's so lame. Like, come up with something cooler for your faction. Why would Omegon be obsessed with the Dark Angels? You know, Omegon and Alfarius, they have a little bit of relationship with the Dark Angels, but not massively so. It's not like a thing. Why would he be so obsessed? And yeah, it just doesn't really work. Abaddon has also met Alfarius in the lore, so presumably he would have recognized Cypher when they meet in 40k. So and also, yeah, it just doesn't really work for me. Cypher is a very complicated thing, and it's tough to really say there's a very obvious and clear answer, but God, it'd be such a shit answer to have it be Omegon, in my opinion. All right, up next, question, a simple one. How do infants get uncorrupted souls from the warp? Or a more difficult one, when will we get the RPG crew together again? Oh, cool, good questions. All right, hi Nick. Yeah, so in terms of the RPG, so I have actually written a good chunk of a Rogue Trader campaign, and I'm quite proud of this because what it is, I'll put it in Discord later if people are interested. I have, or at least the introductory parts of it, I have taken the Vigilus campaign, specifically Vigilus Ablaze, which is the second half of a modern Warhammer 40k campaign that took place in 8th edition, and I have written a campaign that coincides with that lore. And so your characters will be dropped onto the world of Vigilus during the latter stage of the Vigilus Ablaze campaign. So there's so many factions involved in the story, and there is a massive plot line ongoing. Most importantly, of course, Marnius Calgar has come with a whole host of Space Marines to save the world of Vigilus from Abaddon the Despoiler, but you're also there with your own mission, working for an Inquisitor. I've gone the Inquisitor route for the story. So it's yeah, it's a really interesting setting, one of my favorite campaigns in recent history, and yeah, I can share that in chat later. So that is the thing I do intend to do, because I want to do, I've realized that I can't do it as a one shot. I originally wanted to do it as just a one shot, but I think my plan will be for an RPG is we'll do 2 sessions. I'd like to do it just in 2 because it would, yeah, I want to like edit it and actually upload it as a video for people, so it can be like, you know, we played the first edition of Warhammer 40k, and I've tried to include as many crazy things from the original Rogue Trader nuts lore that we all know and love. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And then the other question, how do infants get uncorrupted souls from the warp? So I think you're slightly confused. So I'm going to guess what you're thinking is that souls come back around, like the law that talks about how the Emperor was reborn, the New Man law. But that, in terms of how like normal human beings get their souls, that is not really expanded upon in Warhammer 40k. There might be an obscure reference somewhere I can find, but in terms of how just normal humans get their souls, we don't really know. It's not explained in Warhammer 40k. It's all magic, and it's not something we could possibly comprehend. And all we know is that the size of your soul is connected to the kind of your psychic power, as it were. And if you're a blank, for example, then you're born without a soul, without a reflection in the warp. But you don't take an existing soul to make a child. That's not how it works. But yes, ultimately, all those children will be devoured by demons. So that's a lovely thought, isn't it? Up next, so, oh god, this is a big one. Okay, so what do you think of the idea that the Primarchs are the incarnates of the laws of magic for 40k? We know the winds of magic in fantasy came from the realm of chaos. In 40k, it details the etheric dominions within, ether being the elven word for magic. 9 etheric dominions, 9 Primarchs, Imperium and Chaos, 8 laws of magic, and 8 high magic / undivided. Some examples of these connections are the lion with forest walking and the law of life, Corvus and the law of shadow, Jagatai and heaven with storm seers, meteorological magic, the Star Child and Law of Light, Euphrates Keeler and the Light Bearers using lanterns and prayers in the textbook. Way a Hierophant would channel light magic to burn poxwalkers, the lanterns across the Black Templars model range, Law of Fire used to make someone go on a rage and kill someone else, sounds awfully like the Black Rage. Then there's Apothecary Meros and the Rage Fire. I've gone over this theory in more detail, but this was a quick summary. So, okay, that's a lot of work, and I gotta say, I admire your commitment to coming up with that theory. There's a couple of things that I'm a little bit... I find this an interesting theory, okay, in the sense that what's happened in this theory is you have taken the idea of the 8 etheric dominions, of which there are 8, and you have expanded on it even more. And the reason that's sort of... I find it difficult to take that is because the 8th etheric dominion law is law that is real. It's not from 40k, it's from the heresy, it's from 30k. It hasn't been mentioned in 40k as of yet. But it is very real law. I've talked about it on the channel before. But it's something that gets one mention and then hasn't been mentioned again properly since. There are things about the etheric dominions that give us plausible theories as to what it's referring to, as to what all of these etheric dominions, what all of these warp beings could be, or who they could be. But for some reason, this isn't enough for you. So the first thing is, as I say, there are not 9 etheric dominions. There are 8. So you can actually see it here in this picture he's put below. So you have 8 etheric dominions around the edge. And then I'm guessing from the picture, he's saying that Primordial Annihilation is the 9th etheric dominion. That is not how this works. So Primordial Annihilation is just another word for chaos in Warhammer 40k or 30k. That's just what it means. It just means chaos. So what this wheel is saying is like chaos in the middle, and then all of the etheric dominions are listed around the edge. So there's only actually 8 etheric dominions. Only 8 beings are described in the lore. Primordial Annihilator is not like an additional etheric dominion. So immediately comes into conflict there. However, as to your like general thing of like, oh, well, could the Storm Seers be connected to the Law of Light? No problem with any of this. Of course, the way chaos it works in 40k and chaos works in fantasy or Age of Sigmar, there are going to be a lot of parallels. So that works very well. But the overarching theory as to whether there should be 9 etheric dominions and therefore, like I'm guessing you've got a loyalist and a traitor for each one, that doesn't work, I'm afraid. There are, yeah, I'm sure there are so many like great connections you could find between chaos and the between the fantasy lore and 40k lore in terms of magic. But I'll be honest, this doesn't. Yeah, that's the main issue for me there. But I gotta say, I do really appreciate the work you've gone to. Not really a question, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on the large amount of Dark Angels fans that believe now that the line has returned, the hunt for the fallen has ended, and they will no longer be secretive. Oh, see, my codex is under the table, but I can tell you, yes, so you are right to point that out. That is not correct. So in Warhammer 40k lore, it is correct to say that the lion has returned, and there is all this lore around the Risen, and we have this lore around the lion freeing some of the captured fallen, and what we can assume happens is they then get inducted into the Inner Circle companions, and they essentially rejoin the Dark Angels, which is genuinely incredible and pretty is probably one of the main examples of when people say 40k is a setting, not a story. That is just story. That is just story straight up progressing. So we can definitely say that that is happening. But the lion has not ended, as you say, Zabriel, the hunt for the fallen. That is still ongoing. And generally speaking, the lion is saying to the interrogator chaplains, carry on as usual, business as usual. But occasionally, the lion will intervene if he determines that this member of the fallen is not actually a proper member of the fallen and is actually just one of the deceived Dark Angels that was upon Caliban at the time the lion returned. So you are right to correct this. It's an understandable misconception, but yes, the Dark Angels are not all done with their insanity. The interrogator chaplains are still torturing. If anything, the real grimdark aspect of the lion's return when it comes to the fallen is the fact that not only is the hunt for the fallen technically continuing, but it's really driven home just how pointless interrogating the fallen are. Like, interrogation in the Dark Angels is just like interrogation in real life. You know, people say like there's no point actually torturing people to get answers because you'll never know if they're telling you the truth. That is basically what's happened for the Dark Angels for 10,000 years. They have tortured all of these Space Marines, these Dark Angels, to death, members of the fallen, and they think they've done a really good job at times because a bunch of them have repented, but at the same time, are they just repenting to end their suffering? And how many, and we do have POV of an interrogator chaplain wondering all of a sudden, hang on, have we been making mistakes? And have we just been torturing people to death? And the answer to that question is yes. Would you ever do a review on well-known fan fictions? See, yeah, a lot of them get mentioned. I've never read any of the fan fictions. I think my main concern with it is the fact that my brain is only so large and I can only hold so much information. And when it comes to fan fictions, I just feel like it will be tough to really what's the phrase I'm looking for? It would be tough to really separate what's real and what's not real lore in Warhammer. Like, even I do a lot of this lore live, and people ask me questions when I'm live, as I'm live right now, and it is very easy to trip over things in your own mind. A lot of the books I haven't read for a really long time, and I do sort of worry a little bit that what would happen is I'd read the Dornian Heresy, and the circumstances of Gilliman's betrayal would be stuck in my mind, and I'd end up regurgitating that lore on a live stream. But I do like the idea of it. I gotta tell you that. I do love the idea of the fan fictions, and I've heard that some of them are really good. So no disrespect to them. I genuinely worry I would confuse things in my own brain. And plus, let's face it, I always have more books to read. I'm behind right now, so I there's always more 40k lore. Where they release so many books every single year, so it's there's a lot to get through. Just finished the Eisenhorn Ravener Beckwin story, having a hard time deciding where to go from there. All the other stories seem woefully irrelevant to the setting after that cliffhanger. Any suggestion on where to go from here? Only books I have read in order are the first 3 Heresy books, Siege of Terror, Faith and Fire, James Swallow books, and this series with Beckwin and the boys. Oh, well, the obvious answer to your question is Hammer and Anvil, which is the book after Faith and Fire, assuming you're like a Sister of Battle fan. And then in terms of like other Sister of Battle books, you could read like Morven Vow is probably the most recent like relevant one. That's probably the biggest story, or the Ephriel Stern series, Demonifuge. So yeah, you could go there. I'm just assuming you're a big Sisters guy. As for the rest, after that, so in terms of just like big storylines that you could read, so The biggest storyline, like the most important book I would say you could read right now, is probably a book called Throne of Light. That's a very odd suggestion, it might sound like, because that is book 4 of the Dawn of Fire series. Dawn of Fire series is not very popular, but however, allow me to defend that. In terms of answering your question in terms of which books should I read, which books are most important, the most important plotline in Warhammer 40k is the return of the Emperor of Mankind. You'll have read the Siege of Terra and read the passage where the Emperor cuts off part of your own soul. Throne of Light is the main novel that actually covers lore around a potential return of the Emperor, not in like some abstract, so for example, in some Inquisitor novels like Kotias, you get a theory of how to bring the Emperor back, and it's not real, it's probably never going to manifest into anything. But in Throne of Light, it's a genuine exploration of when the Emperor will return, how the Emperor will return, what that will look like. And that is book 4, as I say, of the Dawn of Fire series. But it's outside of that, it's not the best book I've ever read, I'll be honest with you. But it is important. Like, you probably should read it. So I would get there. As to the other Dawn of Fire series, you could read the other 3. You could just read the first 2. I would recommend the first 1, which is Avenging Sun, which is like the lore of basically Guilliman returning to Terra and the unveiling of the Primaris Marines and the starting of the Indomitus Crusade. All of that stuff, super important, of course. So I would definitely recommend that. Outside of that lore, I would read the Vault of Terror series, which has the lore around the Emperor's kind of failing the Golden Throne and how that's really, really bad for the Imperium of Man. And then Watchers of the Throne series as well, which is lore about the Custodians. From your list, I would definitely read Master of Mankind from the Heresy. That is, if you're happy jumping about, Master of Mankind is super important for understanding like it has ADB aggregating lots of existing Emperor lore and existing theories of the Emperor and kind of putting it all together. And even to this day, it's probably the most cohesive view of the Emperor that we get ever. So yeah, I definitely recommend Master of Mankind. How do you think the talk between Guilliman and the Lion will go? So I would like to see their meeting be a kind of reflection of what happens in the book Unremembered Empire. So Unremembered Empire takes place about halfway through the Heresies, book 31, 32, something like that, by Dan Abnett, and the cover of the book is incredibly misleading. It's Guilliman meeting Sanguinius. Sanguinius is in the book, but only right towards the end. There's pretty much more Vulcan in that book than there is Sanguinius, if I remember. And most of that book is about Guilliman and the Lion's reunion during the Horus Heresy, and Kurz causing a whole bunch of problems for them, whilst Vulcan is just knocked out or insane. And so the reunion between Guilliman and the Lion is a big deal, because when Guilliman and the Lion meet, there's this fantastic passage where we see how much Guilliman looks up to Lionel Johnson, but at the same time, we have this huge problem that the Lion is a massive dick. And so Guilliman can't trust the Lion, and the Lion proves him right, basically immediately, by withholding information about Kurz. So the plot line, the actual meeting is very tense. The Dark Angels are showing off. Guilliman is very tentative, because Guilliman needs someone on Macragge other than himself, because Guilliman wants to create a second Imperium Secundus, but he knows he can't make himself the new emperor of Imperium Secundus, because that would be heresy. But when the Lion comes, he's like, oh great, but also damn, because I think he says something like, of all of my brothers, why did it have to be the Lion? And that's in the same book where he's talking about how much he admires the Lion and looks up to the Lion more than any of the Loyalist brothers. But that's how complex the Lion is as a character. He's a very weird guy. So it's a fantastic passage, and I would like to see the opposite of that, where the Lion, he's gone through this huge humbling now with half his legion, or a lot of his legion, turning against him, and then of course his homeworld being destroyed, and now he's returned and he's aged and everything. So seeing the Lion actually be a bit more humble and break into a hug, although it might seem a bit cliche for a sci-fi setting, for Warhammer 40k, that would hit pretty hard. The other aspect of their reunion is that when the Lion and Guilliman meet in 30k, it's quite funny, because there are Space Wolves on Macragge. There's a bunch of different legions on Macragge, or parts of different legions. And when the Space Wolves led by Fafnir Broodbloater, when they see the Lion, they have to have the jewel, because they always have to have the honor jewel. They're obligated to it, and the Lion just kind of wants to get down to business, and so he ends up he makes very short of the Space Wolf who challenges him, and it's quite a funny scene. So I'd like to see perhaps a mirror of that, and you could see something crazy where you could have not necessarily Logan Grimnar or Ragnar Blackmane, but I'm thinking like Bjorn the Fell-Handed get a new model and challenge Lionel Johnson to an honor duel or something like that, and you could have some like epic moment where the Lion has to try and earn the respect of the Space Wolves, and that would be a great use of his character, I think. So that's how I'd like it to go down, but I haven't thought about it very much, as you can tell. So hey Sandman, quick question about some genetic flaws. So we know that the BA Space Wolves and Alpha Legion were all part of a sub-project when the Emperor was creating the Legions. I can't remember what became of the special project. My question is, when the Red Thirst occurs, or when the wolfening happens, is that the true essence of the Primarchs coming through? If so, will we see a mutation of the Alpha Legion? The BA do a blood chalice ritual and it empowers them, and that is similar to Alpha Legion becoming doppelgangers. Could it be that the Alpha Legion flaw is that they become their Primarch? This is all speculation. So I think you're confusing a couple of things. So, in terms of the special project for the Blood Angel Space Wolves and Alpha Legion, Salamanders Space Wolves and Alpha Legion. I forget the name now. What's it called? The trefoil. Yeah. So this is one of those things that it gets like one paragraph in a campaign book once. It never gets expanded upon, but like it's one of those things that understandably gripped a bunch of Redditors, and then a YouTuber made a video, and then all of a sudden it becomes a thing, and it sounds like it's a massive deal. But the truth is, it has one paragraph in the lore. It has nothing to it. Doesn't mean they will never use it again, but I doubt they'll ever use it again. I'll be honest with you. So, as to whether them suffering from the Red Thirst or the Black Rage is them, sorry, the Red Thirst or the Canis Helix, or the Curse of the Wolfen, is an example of them becoming more like their Primarch. I guess kind of. Of course, Sanguinius doesn't fall to the Red Thirst in the same way, or Liam Morus doesn't fall to the Curse of the Wolfen in the same way at all, but it is still from their genetics, I guess, and it is still something that, allegedly the Emperor, it's implied that the Emperor might even have orchestrated these things to be within the Legion. So especially the Space Wolves in the Battle of the Fang book by Chris Ray, it talks about the idea that perhaps the Curse of the Wolfen is also sort of the Space Wolves' best weapon. And so perhaps this was actually engineered by the Emperor because it can be used to such devastating effect, because they're such powerful warriors. So, oh, great man of sand. Quick question. Assuming GW sticks with the theme of every Primarch inheriting something from the Emperor when they return, the Lion with his shield, Rabute with the sword, for example, what do you think the remaining Primarchs will get when they return? Yeah, so great question. I actually did a whole stream on this a while ago. I think I uploaded it again as a video, so you should be able to find it on my channel. But I'll see if I can remember what I was saying at the time. So my favorite thing that I came up with was on the Emperor's. I'll find an image of the Emperor so we can actually see what I'm talking about. So. So just for reference, this is like true lore, as in it is lore that we can be pretty confident is real, in the sense that the writers, the model designers at Games Workshop, when they designed the Lion for his model returning, they actually said in an interview that when the Primarchs return, each and every one of them is going to get some piece of weaponry from the Emperor, and it is this image of the Emperor that we most often think about. So when Guilliman returned, of course, or actually they've kind of retconned it now, but of course Guilliman has the Emperor's sword, the Lion has the Emperor's shield, taken from the Tilt shield, and so we have sort of the rest of the Emperor's war gear to use. Now, there's a bit of a canon conflict in the sense that it is said that most of the Emperor, or all of the Emperor's weaponry got cut up and used in Terminators and given to different chapters. Like I think the Dark Angels got the the left glove maybe, or something like that originally. So yeah, there's a little bit of canon conflict here, but I think people really like this new lore, and so they're going to carry it on with it. My favorite theory is that, like, I would give this golden bird to Jagatai Khan. The White Scars, of course, incredible hunters, and they often have birds along on their models. So I would love to have Jagatai got this big golden eagle that follows him around, it obeys all of his commands, and does whatever he wants. So I would definitely want something along with that. The cloak I would probably do with Rogel Dawn is probably what I would do. Yeah, I guess like the other option for Rogel Dawn is the claw, because the claw is, he's allegedly missing a hand. We don't know if he can regrow his hand exactly. Primarch physiology is a little bit of a mystery, but he might be able to regrow it. However, personally, I really like the idea that the claw goes to Corvus Corax, because Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard, I like the idea of him having one normal claw and then one golden claw, and I think that would just look epic. So I'm all about that. Outside of that, we've got the Emperor's Codpiece. That would, of course, go to Alfarius. And then, yeah, well, I can't remember what else we said before. Oh, I guess we've got the Circlet. He could give the Circlet to someone like Vulcan, maybe. Would be pretty cool. You've got, yeah, just different armor. His armor could be distributed around the Primarchs. There's all kinds of crazy stuff we could come up with, but they're going to have to get pretty inventive, and I imagine they will be looking more and more at these sigils to thinking what can they use for each one. The Emperor did use a variety of weaponry, like there is art of him using a bolt gun and all this kind of, you know, all this kind of old lore that you could use as well, but I suspect everything will be taken from this image. I did a whole stream on it before, so yeah, do check that out for more, but yeah, there's lots of ways they could do it. Anyway, so Sandman, happy you got new internet. I've been thinking lately, you've said before that you believe the loyal Primarchs coming back are all going to have some form of power, like the Lion's Forest walking ability. Oh, very similar to the last question. I have a theory, since Guilliman doesn't exactly have one. I feel like his ability is going to be what happened at the end of Godblight. He's going to be able to channel the Star Child's power directly through him to become an avatar of the Emperor, if you will. Yes, he previously needed a lot of Psykers and an Eldar to do it before, but I believe he is going to be able to do something similar moving forward. He is the wielder of the Emperor's sword, which in my opinion means he's the Emperor's sword. Means he is the Emperor's sword. I gotcha. I believe he is able to learn to wield the Emperor's holy fire to burn chaos away. Obviously, he won't hold the power to resurrect himself and burn Nurgle's garden at will, something lesser. Thank you for joining my TED Talk for the day. I kind of half agree with you, I think. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. So I like the idea that he's able to utilize more of the sword. The sword isn't just a fiery sword that can permakill demons. Perhaps he can emit fiery arcs of lightning or something from the sword. I think that would be really cool. But we do know that the Emperor is already involving himself in Guilliman's fights. He directly saves the Guilliman from some word-bearers, Dark Apostles, during the book The Silent King, and just, reaches down from the warp and turns warp arrows to nothing. So the Emperor's power is already preserving Guilliman and the Lion, presumably, in a way. So I guess, yeah, you will be satisfied in that respect, if that's really what you're looking for. Well, another long one. Okay. Hey Sandman, I hope you're doing well. Here is a theory you might want to consider. Vashtor and Perturabo are not looking to open the Great Rift, but instead to close it. I know, crazy statement, but looking at the current layout of things, Vashtor looks like he is going to end up corrupting, if not overtaking, Belisaria's caused Pylon network. This network will technically be designed to close the Great Rift, and even if it were reversed, it would assumedly just expand whatever it is there. So the obvious question is then, what's the point of the weapon and the key? The key, as we know it, can basically burrow through dimensions. The pylons would make that aspect of the device pointless, less potent. Then there is Perturabo attempting to take the Cadian Gate. The Great Rift has made entrance into the galaxy along the rift easier than ever before, so why in the world would Perturabo want the Cadian Gate? Wouldn't there be a significantly more useful places to invade the galaxy other than the Cadian Gate, so why? You know what, I realize as I'm reading this, I may have done this poster dirty because this is from a month ago, and so this law I've just realised is taken because it wasn't really making sense to me when he was talking about Acadia. I've realised because that post is from a month ago, he obviously wasn't aware of the new Perturabo law when he posted it. So sorry to that post. That is slightly out of date. In the new campaign that just came out, it's revealed that Perturabo intends to start from like the area of Cadia, but ultimately create this infinite citadel that he hopes will one day span the galaxy, I guess. And so yeah, he's starting there, intends to go outwards. That's my mistake. In terms of what the key does, I'll answer that part of your question. The key, we don't really know as of yet. That's why they're using such vague terminology to talk about this technology. But I think the most likely answer is it's something to do with the webway. Vashtor talks to Abaddon in the Arcs of Omen series about the old ones, and they were of course one of the creators of the webway. So I think that would make the most sense. And I think that has got me all caught up. But I have seen a bunch of questions in chat, which I will get to. So we'll go through those now. Super chat: are the Space Wolves better with or without Russ? As far as we know, everybody is worse without their Primarch. I think that Russ is a very capable commander, at least by the end of the Heresy, and so he would be extremely useful if he had returned to the Space Wolves. And in particular, it makes you think about the Blood Angels lore, and where we get the lore on them being the Remnant Legion, and without their Primarch, they were a complete mess, and they were like as bad as the World Eaters pretty much. And it's only after Sanguinius returns that they become the noble sons of blood that we all know and love. So they were always crazy vampire boys, but they're a bit less crazy now. So yes, I would say it would be very good for him to return. Greedo the Green, just finished the Night Lords books. They were so good. What should I read next? So I really rate the Black Legion series, also by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. So I would definitely recommend those. If you haven't read Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, then read that because he does meet Talos in that book. Well, meets him again. James, the only important quote regarding Erebus in the whole Heresy novel is 2 words, 2 words long. 1, get, 2, up. Can't disagree with that at all. Yes, definitely. I actually would like one day I'll do a video on Erebus, and I will make sure to include all of that stuff. But I mean, reading it's in Fear to Tread at the end that he gets flayed by Horus, and it is a surprisingly satisfying scene to read, even though it's got a man being flayed in it. So it really tells you how much you can grow to hate that guy. I personally thought Descent of Angels was a nice change of pace and a really good book. I went straight to it after Fulgrim. Good. I mean, it is a very nice change of pace, and that is cool. Like I often have it with the Tau books. The Tau are very different novels to the rest of 40k. They're of course much more uplifted, and they're much more naive as a race. So it's it feels more positive. It's kind of a nice change of pace. The setting seems to have lost a lot of momentum. Do you think this is intentional, or do you think they've run out of good ideas for now? I think that they definitely don't want to release all of the good lore at once. They definitely want to hold back on returning all of the Primarchs, on fixing every chapter that needs fixing. So they're definitely going to try and slow things down as much as possible. But in terms of it being slow, I guess it depends on your comparison. If you returned to Warhammer or started Warhammer at the start of 8th edition, a lot of stuff was moving very quickly, so that would have felt the norm. But for like the 30 years prior, 40k moved very slowly, or not at all, arguably. So really, it's still going quite fast, to be honest with you. But yes, I can understand wanting things to speed up, definitely. I'll be interested to see, I think this month, Dawn of War 4 is supposed to come out. So we'll see what the Lion lore is looking like, and we'll see if we get any expansion there or suggestions as to what his lore is going to do. But sometimes, when it rains, it pours, and with Warhammer 40k, it can just take its time. When it comes to the Horus Heresy, there is so many. Read the essentials and the ones that pertain to your preferred factions. Yeah, definitely. I guess it's one of those things where, in terms of cutting things out, it's a really difficult question, because there are some plot lines you could fill quite quickly, right? So if you don't read Vulcan Lives, like you need to know why Vulcan is on McCrag, how he got there, why he's insane. You need to know that. But to actually explain it is, well, Vulcan was captured by Conrad Kurz after Istvan V, and then he was tortured but couldn't be killed because he's a perpetual, so he was tortured over and over again and killed over and over again to the point of insanity. Ultimately, Conrad Kurz puts him in a labyrinth, and Vulcan's able to escape using his hammer, but when he's found by Gilliman, he is unfortunately insane. That kind of tells you everything you need to know, so you don't need to read the book. Likewise, I want to say skipping the Salamanders books, a lot of that is just summing up the fact that Vulcan, it goes back to Nocturne and then back to Terra, and you just need to know why he's on Terra, really. So you don't have to have read Deathfire and Old Earth to really understand everything. If you had to give Lionel Johnson a trilogy on the level of Dark Imperium for Gilliman, in terms of his contribution, what would you want to see besides it being set in Nihilus, which is obvious? Yes, you are. Yeah, you are done the money. Seeing any trilogy based in Nihilus would be so good, wouldn't it? Just finding out what is happening there, even Lord of Excess. Is it Lord of Excess? What was the name of that book? Yes, Lords of Excess. Lords of Excess, that book was a really fun book because Xantine, the character, the main Empress Children character in the book, he was a member of the Black Legion, and then he ends up like ruling over this planet because there's so much going on. Abaddon's unlikely going to be able to find him in the future, so the forces of chaos are on kind of in turmoil, and the forces of the Imperium are obviously in turmoil, and then there's Tyranids rising to take over planets where they can. Like the whole vibe of that book is pretty fun. So Imperium Nihilus is a good time, and I would just like to see more lore based there. And yes, in terms of what I want to see the Lion do, well, I think the obvious answer is I would love to see him go on a quest to find Leman Russ. So when Lionel Johnson returns, we get this fantastic passage where when he's in Mirror Caliban, which is like this warp dimension that the Lion and those who he allows to enter can enter, then when he's in there, he ends up confronting a character called the Fisher King, and the Fisher King has 3 items before him which are supposedly a hint at what the Emperor wants the Lion to do. The Fisher King being a manifestation of the Emperor who can't talk to the Lion, and the 3 items are a chalice, a spear, and a candelabra. So in terms of what in terms of what the Lion's plotline would be, I guess it would be based around that. The candelabra, I would guess it would be something like defend Imperium Nihilus until the light of the Emperor, the light candelabra, can one day unite all of the worlds of humanity once again. Then the spear, the chalice, I think is a reference to the idea that the Emperor does want the Lion to safeguard the line of Sanguinius. The sons of Sanguinius must survive, and so yeah, they are part of the Lion's responsibility. And then the spear, I think, is probably a reference to Leman Russ, because Leman Russ was given a spear by the Emperor, the Dionysian spear. And so I think that I would probably want it based around that. So maybe the first book would be about him protecting the Blood Angels. The second book would be about him reuniting with the Space Wolves and going on this quest to find Leman Russ. And maybe that doesn't necessarily end with him finding Leman Russ, but at the very least, it starts that plot line. And all the Primarchs are going to return, but I don't want them all to return out of nothing. I want there to be build up. I quite like the fact that we've seen a Perturabo imagery, but we haven't seen Perturabo's model yet. I like the idea that it's building. Now we're all pretty hyped for Perturabo's proper return. So I would do something based around that, and those 3 items tell us what's going to happen in the series. Which I think there's probably a reasonable chance that's somewhere accurate, because I don't think Mike Brooks would have put those in the novel on a whim. I think they would have been deliberate. Do you think we will see more around traitors and traitor legions finding other goals outside of destroying the Imperium? For example, a series where Angron wants to usurp Khorne by killing him. Ooh. Cool question. So I guess, would you consider Perturabo's lore to fulfill that criteria? Because in a way, the Perturabo isn't trying to destroy the Imperium as such as create his infinite citadel, and I guess destruction of the Imperium is a byproduct of that. Maybe I don't know. I guess it depends on your how you view things. Fulgrim definitely wants to just be the new emperor from his novel that came out last year. As for the rest of them, yeah, I guess it's a difficult thing to do, because you would need some wholly new plot lines. Like in terms of remaining chaos plot lines you could use, you could do things like Magnus trying to undo the damage of the rubric, but that's typically an Ahriman storyline. Mortarion, you know, outside of trying to destroy the Imperium, he spends his time trying to bring Typhus back in line, or torturing the soul of his dead dad. So like other dead dad. So yeah, there's not too much to do, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it would be a really good thing to establish more in that realm. I'm trying to think of what more we could do. Yeah, I mean, Magnus trying to return the sorcerer, or bring the sorcerer, planet of the sorcerers, into real space. That was a good example, I think, of him genuinely wanting to accomplish something. Yeah, something, an old thing. Who else have we got? Lorgar. Lorgar's a really interesting one, because in a way, Lorgar has sort of won. So I think that Lorgar is spreading chaos cults and having a good time, as far as we know, and also as far as we know, he isn't too invested in becoming like the new emperor or anything like that. He's just dedicated to the service of the dark gods. I would guess that he will become the opposite of the Star Child. The Star Child being kind of like the greatest representation of the emperor in the setting, but. Yeah, no, you do make a really good point. It's kind of hard not to bring every traitor plotline back to they just want to destroy the Imperium, really. So yes, I think more. Chat, let me know if you can think of anything. What might be a good avenue? I guess it's just the problem that I have. I guess is that when you're a demon primarch, you're a demon prince, which means you are part of that chaos god or chaos gods, and so you're not really your own person anymore. So they can kind of betray one another, but even Skarbrand, when Skarbrand attacked Khorne, he was still a part of Khorne at the time. It's not something we can really comprehend, but it's a bit odd. What would be a better title for the book? Wolf Time. I still think Space Wolves should riot, by the way. A better time. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, this is a common joke that we brought up on the channel many times. So there's a reference to the idea that there's a book in the Dawn of Fire series, if you're not familiar, called Wolf Time. It's book 3 of the Dawn of Fire series. And in that book, there is nothing really about the Wolf Time. The Wolf Time is the prophesized return of Leman Russ, the darkest days of the Space Wolves, when he will one day return, from the first edition of Warhammer. And yet in that book, although they kind of talk about the Wolf Time, they talk about it in the context of, is it the Wolf Time? And therefore, what should we do? And the answer to that question is, well, kind of. It's kind of maybe perhaps going to be the Wolf Time in the near future, which, to clarify, is always the case. So it's a very clickbaity title for a Black Library novel. It's they're really just trying to get it. Like when they announced that book, novel fans were like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" So is this going to be the book of Leman Russ's return? And what will they call Leman Russ's actual return now, if not Wolf Time? Yeah, I mean, I think that calling it something like Prophecy would have been better. Prophecy of the Wolf Time, or something like that. That would have made more sense. I think something, I was going to say the word Legion, but Legion is the name of a heresy book. But one of the big aspects of that book is that they meet Guilliman, and Guilliman gives the Space Wolves permission to sort of act like a Legion a bit more again. So that's kind of, restoration, something like that. But every Space Wolf book has got some dumb fucking name. Wolf Time, Ice Spear, they've all... they can't name things as shit. Okay, Battle of the Fang, Stormcaller, Sons of Fenris, Wolf's Blade, Ragnar's Claw, Wolf's Honor. Good God, I mean, yeah. Return of the Wolf, maybe something like that. That would have been more fitting. Wolf's Honor. Oh my God, yeah. Oh, Games Workshop, you do make me laugh. I tell you what, there's a lot of questions in chat that will disappear if I don't get to them. So I'm going to stick to chat just for a while. But I'll do another one of these sessions in the future, and I'll make sure if you post your questions onto the community tab, I'll get to them. I'll try and do these more regularly if people like them. But yeah, it's pretty useful. Some of them I'll try and use for actual videos as well if I think they're worth a proper exploration. I gotta say, Dante isn't arrogant. He doesn't want it to be him, but but he keeps coming back. So maybe it is. At least that's the thought, I believe. Yes, you are right. Sorry, I did not intend to suggest that Dante arrogantly thought he was the Golden Warrior. You are exactly correct. He thinks it might be him, but he doesn't want to admit it because he is aware of how arrogant it would sound. You are very much correct. I recently got a copy of the Rogue Trader rulebook from first edition. The artwork and lore is awesome. 100% recommend chat pick it up if they find one at a fair price. Yes, I mean I picked up a new edition a few years ago. They were re-released by Games Workshop when just for like a limited edition run. So they'll probably do that again in the future. Is Erda coming back? Probably not now the heresy is over. But they have written, of course, Drop Site Massacre. So it's not impossible that they'll revisit parts of the heresy and the Siege of Terra. And if they do so, I think it would be nice to get just a little bit more on Erda, because, of course, her coming and going was pretty quick. Basically, in one book, out the next time she appears. So, yes, you are right. For such a big, background character of 40k, it was a bit bizarre. Hello, sorry if this has already been asked, but what do you think of the King in Yellow if it's really Valdor, and do you think his current objectives are in 40k? Oh, I mean, that is the first King in Yellow mention of the day. So, in terms of who Valdor, who the King in Yellow is, I am still very confident that it is Valdor. I think that the theories have gotten better on who else it could be, but the truth is, like I read I read the Beckwin series after Ravener and Eisenhorn, and like it's revealed to be Constantine Valdor at the end of Beckwin Penitent. The last words of the book are Constantine Valdor. This is after great speculation on who it could be, and so I think that the idea that the idea that Dan Abnett in the next book would then rug pull it and do something else, who knows? As to what his motivation would be, the most obvious answer is that it is connected to his vision that he got when he stabs Abaddon during the Siege of Terra. And this, given that the sequence from my POV goes like this, and Dan Abnett is aware of this, I read Beckwin Penitent, I knew Baldor's plotline in the Siege of Terra would therefore be super important, and Dan Abnett knew we would all be scrutinizing this. Then I read The End and the Death, and in The End and the Death, Valdor has a vision where he sees the Despoiler. I don't believe Dan Abnett would do this all as like to then rug pull us and say, lol, no, it's actually Zaranchek Xanthus. I just don't believe that would happen. So I think that we can be pretty confident that it's Constantine Valdor from like a meta point of view, but I know that's not going to satisfy everybody. As to how it fits with his motives, the most obvious answer is that it was Abaddon's vision, the vision he got from stabbing Abaddon, or Abaddon catching the spear, and then him on some sort of quest to discover, do something for the Emperor. My personal theory is that Constantine Valdor is trying to create the Star Child. That's what I think he's trying to do. And he's got his fingers in a lot of pies, as discussed in the novel. But one of the most important aspects, and the thing brought up probably most often, is the concept of grails and these blanks, and why he's farming blanks. Why is he farming all these blanks, and what's the deal with these grails? And a grail is like a luminous warp entity, and a blank is a vessel for one of these grails in Valdor's view. And so the grails are put into the vessels. That is basically the Star Child. You're taking the soul of the Emperor, or part of the soul of the Emperor, and you want to put it into a body. that is basically what the Star Child is. So my personal theory is that book 3 will end with Beta Beckwin, who's the primary character. She will become the Star Child. That's what I think will happen. But that's just a theory. I will say that the book is incredibly confusing, and there's so much going on deliberately because Dan Abnett's, I think, trying to confuse us all. So the one slight situation where Marines are better without their Primarch is during Karl Dammarch, when the Scars seek spiritual vengeance in that state. Ritual of Karl Dammarch. Yes, there is also a suggestion that perhaps is it? I think it's Perturabo who says that perhaps the Iron Hands are better without Ferrus Manus because they're more driven and they're more, they're more committed to getting stuff done and flexible. What do you think with the Perturabo? What do you think Perturabo? Do you think Perturabo will actually get close to Terra, and will there be a second Siege of Terra? Although I think that is unlikely. Well, there's kind of already been a second Siege of Terra in the War of the Beast series, but yes, in terms of will Abaddon the Despoiler or Perturabo besiege Terra again, I think it's pretty likely actually in our lifetime. I will say, not like next edition, but like in our lifetime, because everything has to go there eventually, right? Everything has to lead to that point, and yeah, I think that doesn't necessarily have to be the end of the setting. So we will see but I think it's relatively likely in our lifetime, as I say. So we're talking decades. Don't hold me to it like 11th edition. But I think it's like I said, I think it can happen. As to whether it will be Perturabo, though, I doubt it. I think it will always be Abaddon. But yeah, I mean, Perturabo is a very popular character, and no doubt he will draw the ire of Rogel Dawn at some point in the future. So that will be an epic campaign. And the idea that Perturabo gets quite a lot done, like if he gets all of these little fortress worlds across the Imperium that are linked somehow, and Rogel Dawn and the Imperial Fists try to bring him down. God, that would be epic, wouldn't it? What like the terrain would look so good, the models would look so good. I'd be all about that. You'd have like, I want Primaris breaches. I want the whole hog. I'm returning since 3rd edition. The pace in 25 years is huge. Yes, it's definitely a lot. I mean, yeah, like people often ask about, is Warhammer a setting or a story? And we definitely used to always say Warhammer is a setting and not a story. But we used to always say you won't get squats in 40k. The Primarchs will never return. The Fallen will never be forgiven. We used to say all of these things, and now it's all kind of changing. So tough to really, things are all up in the air. When people say you'll never know who the 2nd or 11th Primarchs are, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of stuff we weren't supposed to know. Why do you think the Thousand Sons immediately turned traitor after the fall of Prospero? One day they were chilling, then the wolves attack, and by the end of the day, they're just like, screw it, by the Emperor. Yeah, I mean, the book Crimson King makes things a little bit more confusing, but yes, broadly speaking, I guess that is still true. So yeah, I guess it's just the fact that they had no other option, realistically. And so, yeah, when the wolves fell upon them, it was just evidence of the fact that they had nowhere else to turn. So it's the savage tragedy of Warhammer 40k, I guess, isn't it? It's that they very easily could have been saved, could have been on the loyalist side, but Lehman Russ was not having it. If you were creating your own custom chapter, what would the lore and theme behind it be? I mean, I would definitely... I don't know. Yeah, nice. I went too far. I shouldn't have said definitely. The only thing I think I would definitely do, just because I've always liked it, is to have my own power weapon. I've always liked chapters that have their own power weapons. I like the Size of the Emperor, where the chapter I chose as a kid, they're an Ultramarine successor chapter. They're actually a relatively big deal now because they are connected to the world of Sotho, which comes up in the Belisarius Cool Book, etc. So they're pretty big deal. But the I definitely want to do that. It's like Atlantean spearers of the Emperor. I've always loved your own power weapons, so I would want to do something like that. I don't know, there's too much left to choose from. But yeah, maybe come up with something. I guess I would, if I was going to do a successor chapter, I wouldn't do Dark Angels because it would be too similar. I wouldn't do Blood Angels because I couldn't, like, I wouldn't be able to imagine them at Baal. Maybe a Salamander's successor chapter, maybe something like that. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, I'll have a think. I've never really designed my own successor chapter before, to be honest with you. If you have one, let me know what you think. But yeah, I definitely want my own power weapons, and I think I'll try a quartered scheme. I've always thought quartered schemes look quite good. Yeah, Salamander's successor. I'll have a think. Is Abaddon working for the Emperor? I highly doubt it. Not necessarily like impossible, or maybe he's working for the Emperor in a way. There is something I like to bring up. On the world of Goro, the scrap world, the Emperor saves Abaddon directly. Right, we get to see this in the Wolf of Ash and Fire, something like that. Yeah, the Wolf of Ash and Fire. And when the Emperor saves Abaddon, it is obviously quite funny because Abaddon would one day become a pain in the ass. But yeah, perhaps the Emperor foresaw that one day Abaddon would be necessary for his plans. And Abaddon does have like golden eyes in 40k because he stared into the Astronomicon. So perhaps they connected. There's lots of possibilities. How do Primarchs get souls since they are artificial creatures? So in terms of how they actually get souls comes from the idea, like in the story, the last story of the heresy is the Carrion Lord of the Imperium, and at the start of that there's a passage that talks about how the custodians, Diocletian Coros, gets to watch as the Emperor reaches his hand behind the metaphysical veil. So he seemingly withdraws the warp energy which he crafts into their souls, or whatever it's going to be. But according to the forces of chaos, the Emperor stole the fire of the Chaos Gods, whatever that means. Oh, this is a fantastic question. What do you think the likelihood of the King in Yellow getting his hands on Clone? What do you think is the likelihood of the King in Yellow getting his hands on Clone Grim and releasing him? The reason I like that is because we get a King in Yellow alert, and then we get a full engine. Fantastic. We got both in one alert. That's super. I think that is a channel first. I need to add more alerts to the channel. I'm trying to think, what are the most common questions I get on the channel now? Yeah, it's always King in Yellow. It's always Clone Grim. The Lion Gilliman meeting is a pretty common question. That does come up a lot. I can make one for that. Yeah. If there any suggestions, guys, put them in Discord, or else I'm worried I'll miss them. But yeah, we'll see. How will they run Abaddon compared to the Primarchs? Abaddon is only a normal Astarte. Will they retcon or add lore to him somehow? Yeah, basically add lore to him. I think that they only have in modern imagery created an Abaddon figure that is opposite the Primarchs in stature. So in Gilliman's model and Abaddon's model, they're pretty much designed to be opposite one another. Hang on. Yes, so they're pretty much designed to be opposite one another. And in the artwork we got of 8th edition, they were pretty much designed to be opposite one another as well. So I think that is definitely the idea. And let's face it, the setting wouldn't really work if any of the Primarchs could comfortably smoke Abaddon, because yeah, he just wouldn't be a threat anymore. However, you are right to point out that he is an Astarte, and at the end of the day, he needs to get a big bump up to be a credible threat to the Primarchs. So yeah, so that's sort of where we are now. So so Abaddon is likely going to get an expansion, I guess, in his lore in terms of his final Black Legion book. And when he gets Dracnien, he's probably going to be a very different kind of figure. But he has had like 10,000 years or however long he's been in the Eye of Terror of earning the approval and praise of Chaos Gods and Primarchs and all sorts of things. So he will likely be a being that is of a Primarch's caliber because he's been gifted with so much power, or he's taken so much power over the last 10,000 years. But it's a fair question. Chances of Conrad ever returning, and would it be fully dependent on the Corona Nox holding his soul? So, to be honest, I don't know if it would be at all connected to the Corona Nox holding his soul, because Lords of the Night, yes. Lord of the Night is a pretty old piece of Warhammer 40k lore. It still holds up in the sense that it's like, it's still got a Conrad curse that is in line with, broadly speaking, what we would expect. But it's, yeah, over 20 years old at this point, geez. So Simon Spurrier hasn't written for 40k for a pretty long time, and I don't think he's ever going to again, unfortunately. So yeah, I don't know if anybody will do. Like, ADB thought about including what's his face, Sahal. He thought about including Sahal in the Night Lords trilogy, and then he messaged Simon Spurrier to ask for like permission. He didn't like technically need it, but I think he asked for it because sort of like respect. And then Simon Spurrier, I think, never came back to him. So that's why he didn't include it. But I guess if that's the mentality of Black Library writers, that they don't like to touch lore that has, you know, otherwise hasn't been utilized by them before, then it might not get used at all. However, it would sort of work, yes. If it is a Spirit Stone, then there's no reason, I guess, that it couldn't be tuned to hold a Primarch soul, and then in that way, Conrad Kurz would return. But weirdly, in the Night Lords trilogy, they do sort of address it, where yes, Sahal has the Corona Nox, which he thinks means that he is entitled to command over the Night Lords. But at the same time, there are all manner of trophies and grisly relics from the Night Lords over their 10,000 years that various lords hold, and they think entitle them to command of the Night Lords. So it's sort of like brushed away in that respect. Someone the other day floated the idea that she's pretty sure GW are making the Dark Angels completely or the most chaos resistant Astartes. Thoughts on GW potentially doing that? I don't know if the Space Marines would be the most chaos resistant, because of course a lot of them have fallen to chaos. So I don't know how well that tracks. But there is definitely lore on the Lion, and the Lion potentially having this ability to kind of, I guess, sniff out chaos is the way you'd describe it. He has that ability to kind of tell which of his sons have or haven't fallen to serving the dark gods. And if they have fallen, then he will still kill them. So in a way, the Dark Angels will be pure of taint inevitably, because the Lion would be able to tell. So maybe that's the angle. But outside of knowing specifically what she was talking about, I don't know. What's your thoughts on the new Wordbearers book? I'm really enjoying it. Are you a fan of these vignette style books that don't really further the overall narrative? Yes, I am. So I actually talked about that book a few weeks ago. Panicrest, thank you so much for the super chat. I kind of like these books, that do that sort of thing, in the sense that they still seek to add something to the setting. So, for example, in that book, you get a genuine attempt to, I think, explain why worlds fall to chaos, and that kind of angle. And I think that's pretty fun. I think that is an author genuinely taking upon a challenge, and it's not just sort of a meaningless, these two Space Marines are going to try and kill a demon, and you're like, does this add anything to any of these factions? And the answer is no. Like, the Exorcist's book, for example, was another book that I really liked, where it doesn't do anything for like the overall 40k narrative. They probably won't play a massive role in the end times if there was one, but it does so much for the Exorcists, and they're such an interesting faction. I was happy to see it. I think that likewise things like, talking about that Wordbearers book again, seeing different Sisters of Battle orders is always going to be interesting, because Sisters of Battle we've known so little about for so long. It's just kind of nice to have different angles. And she's a pragmatist, but she's not as zealotry as some of the other sisters. Abaddon showed up in the mid-90s as the Horror's replacement Chaos Big Boss, long before they even thought about returning Primarchs or Custodians leaving the Imperial Palace. He needs something special. Yeah, I think he will be. Seems like Angron's Butcher's Nails are the most fixable thing in the whole Warhammer 40k universe. Even the Emperor returning most not fixable thing, sorry. Even the Emperor returning or the Lost Primarch seems way more plausible. Angron would be cooler without. Yes, I get where you're coming from. Yes, the fact that the Emperor wasn't able to fix the nails, I guess, is tough to imagine, given that we know the Emperor as a being of unimaginable intelligence. But yeah, I mean, the fact that he couldn't and Arkanlankan is, yeah, something, yeah, I guess just sets it as it is. As to whether Angron could be healed, as it were, is a really interesting question. Because like the other option that you have is that assuming you could accomplish the main task, which is detaching Angron from Khorne, then if you could do that, the other thing I can imagine is the Emperor could kill Angron, euthanize him, and have his soul be reborn in a new body without the nails. That's the other thing I can think of. Which character from 30k would you love to see back? Oh, I mean, I think Litu is. I'd be really excited to see Litu again. That would be awesome. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they can only do so many. I think Litu's pretty likely. If Basilio Foe or Zaranchek Xanthus does return, that'll be a big time. That'll be a big deal. I would love to see that. Yeah, yeah, I think probably Litu is the character I would go with. Why aren't there any Iron Hand successors that embrace flesh and reject implants? Could the Iron Hands themselves start adopting this mentality? So, Iron Hand successors, are there any like non-weird ones? So, yeah, I don't think so. They're all a bit odd. Sorry, what that embrace flesh and reject implants? Could the Iron Hands themselves maybe start adopting this mentality? So I mean, the Iron Hands are sort of their lore has always been pretty driven by this idea that the death of their Primarch drove them to kind of a darker place, and that's why they sort of are very committed to that idea. Interestingly, Ferrus Manus never liked the idea of them replacing parts of their body with metal, but yeah, never properly stamped it out. How do you think the conversation between Guilliman and the Lion would go? Would they agree on anything? Do you think they would talk about Sanguinius? Yeah, I definitely need this a lot. So that was actually a question we got earlier. But yes, sorry, briefly to sum up again. So I think that it will be a reflection of what happened in Unremembered Empire. I think that you will have the Lion and Guilliman arrive. It will look very tense, and then I think the Lion will demonstrate his change of character as to whether and show that he will kind of break into a hug for Guilliman, and that will diffuse the tension quite drastically. But the other aspect of it that I think will remain is the fact that I think the Space Wolves will be there, and that will sort of take center stage of the reunion, because they will inevitably want to challenge Lionel Johnson to a battle. And I think, you know, Khorne the Fell-Handed, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the last time he saw the Lion probably had just stabbed his Gene Father through the chest. So I can't imagine he's going to be too happy to see him, which would be pretty cool. Does Korax have a giant raven monster demon form, or is that just AI slop lore? So he does have a giant raven monster form, but he's not really a demon. So in the story of Shadows of the Past, it's always interesting that people call him a demon. That is the AI slop bit, because he is very specifically said not to be a demon. Like Lorgar says, that's not a demon. It's not a demon. It's Corvus Corax, right? So what Corvus is he's the same as he's always been, but he is without the fleshy covering that he usually has when he's outside of the Eye of Terror. And so he says, like, I'm what we always were, or something like that. And that's why he's able to kind of unlock those abilities, because he's more connected to like the warp aspect of himself. So he's just that's what Primarchs can do inside of the Eye of Terror, basically. Okay, new idea. Abaddon works towards releasing the demon Primarchs, so he can solely use them for Empire, seeing as he's using Chaos and not Chaos using him. Interesting. So, I mean, they're all sort of free as it were anyway. Like, I guess they have to be summoned. But Abaddon's problem is more just like how to control them, how to direct them. They're very willful creatures, and yeah, they're terrible teammates, as powerful as they are. So that's his main challenge. Which Primarch could return in Warhammer 40k? So I think the next Primarch to return, Loyalist, will be Jagatai Khan, but they'll all come back outside of the dead ones. So I do think they'll all come back at some point. But yeah, personally, I'm on the Khan. How will Lorgar interact with the Star Child, given the Star Child's godlike powers indirectly come from Lorgar and his writings? I think that's probably why they would be pretty good opposites. But when the Star Child actually manifests, we don't know what it will look like. You know, the prophecy says something like it'll have ancient knowledge and incredible power, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will immediately be able to smoke down demon Primarchs. Perhaps that being won't even know they're the Emperor initially, and it will take time. Do you think that some of the Rangdan Xenos are still alive in the outermost region of the Milky Way, or are they absolutely extinct? Well, it was said that there was one codex on the Rangdan that was kept by the Dark Angels. Presumably they still have it. And if that's the case, then maybe they kept it because they thought maybe some of them had survived. So not impossible, not impossible. Is there any indication that the other demon Primarchs know about the confrontation between Guilliman and Mortarion, i.e. finding out their dad burned the Garden of Nurgle? Well, in a way, yes, I guess. So when Khorne intervenes in the Arcs of Omen campaign, he like strikes through Angron. That is sort of him doing a similar thing to what the Emperor did. He's kind of acting through his servant. So perhaps they all saw it. And it was in the warp. So wouldn't surprise me that they all know. I would assume they all know, to be honest. What is more likely to happen? A model that reveals one of the lost Primarchs, or a model that brings back one of the super dead Primarchs? I would actually say lost. I think that the problem with bringing back a super dead Primarch is that you risk undoing the story. Do you know what I mean? Like if you brought back Conrad Kurz, it would just sort of, it would make it feel like that nothing matters in the lore. You'd reach that sort of stage. Do you know what I mean? So I think that, yeah, Lost Primarch's actually probably better. I want Perturabo to kill Yarrick, and Yarrick gets revived, but what a bullshit with the green glowy aura, but everyone thinks it was the Emperor, so he gets sanctified. He could do, yeah, I mean, it's such a popular fan theory, then... yeah, I can understand why so many people go down that route. The Hydra has 3 heads, so could there be another Primarch who has not been revealed? Possible. I saw this on the last stream. I think it's unlikely, but it's possible. Yeah, I can't say no for sure. What's your opinion on the new vets? Oh shit, I haven't spoken about these. Well, it's only the vet, right? It's only one. It's only one model so far. Is that right? I saw there was a lot of talk about this online and in some of the group chats I'm in. That worked. Yes. So if you haven't seen on, yes, Games Workshop for 11th edition have revealed at least the Sergeant model of the Vanguard veterans, and this was relatively controversial because people have said, well, this model is pretty boring. It's not very interesting. If you compare it to the new Space Wolves models, if you compare it to the Ultramarines models, even the Black Templars, you know, it's just not particularly interesting. And it's an interesting complaint because some people just hate Space Marines, so there's always going to be a little bit of people that jump on the anti-Space Marine bandwagon, and I can respect it. I can respect not liking Space Marines, but at the same time, this is a beginner's box. Like, this is sort of what it is designed to do. It is designed to be a blank canvas for you to put any Space Marine chapter onto. That's sort of what we all know and love. Like, if you look at this model and that helmet does nothing for you, I can't make you like Space Marines. I can't make you do it. But for those of us that do like this, we're like, oh shit, that's a Mark 7 helmet. We love Mark 7. You know, this is awesome. It's the classic 40k armor. That looks so cool. But if you're not interested, then it's just going to be boring for you. So I can understand why some people hate this stuff, but at the same time, some people just don't get. Like, I find it a really interesting conversation because I saw about this in a group chat where, you know, you get these like Age of Sigmar fans that are like, our models are so much better and they're so much more complicated and there's all these extra pockets and like little rivets and all this sort of thing. And it's like, but that's not why I like Space Marines. I like Space Marines because of the lore and because of what the armor represents. And Games Workshop have done such a good job of building up this deep history to Space Marine armor that makes models like this genuinely entertaining for us. So if you don't like it, I really won't try and convince you to like it, because yeah, like this is what it is. But what I find odd is it goes the other way. There are so many people that try to convince you that models that you like suck, and you're like, I'm sorry, man, I just like Space Marines. I just do. I will buy those Vanguard vets and I will have a great time, because I will paint onto them Dark Angel's heraldry. I'll put on Deathwing symbols. I'll put on symbols from campaigns. I like that. To me, that's a great fucking time. Like, I love that so much. And if it does nothing for you, it does nothing for you. It is what it is. But yes, sorry, that was quite a stronger response than I expected to give. But seeing all these like weird complaints about how boring Space Marines are, and I'm like, but like, they're not. The point of a Space Marine isn't that he has 9,000 different symbols on him every single time. That's why the symbols matter. And the mixing of armor marks is important, because it's not all the time. Anyway, I don't know. Let me know what you think, guys. Which Primarch would you not bring back? I think if I was going to do it, I would go all out. And I would bring back Rogel Dawn and then kill him. I would do that, and just like really put people on edge. You know, think about how we'd all view the setting if that happened. It would add a lot. It might even be worth it financially for how engaging the setting would feel at that point. The fact that Games Workshop just killed a Primarch, everyone would second guess that things can't happen. Maybe bring him back, give him a model, and then kill him. Anyway, I think we'll call that the end of the stream. We're about 2 hours in now. This has been a lot of fun, and yeah, thanks so much everyone that submitted questions. I think this actually worked really well, so I'll probably do this again in the future. And yeah, if you have other questions and I can't get to them in stream, please do post them in the community tab. I'll try and do these more regularly. But thank you so much everybody that joined me. This was an absolute pleasure. I'll see you again on Sunday, and yeah, have a good rest of your week all. Thanks for watching this stream. If you could help me appease YouTube's machine spirit by liking and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. If you couldn't make the stream live but want to ask me a question anyway, consider posting it in our community tab and I'll answer it next time. To support the channel, click the join button below, which will give you access to more content, and you can drop into the members Discord, where all the coolest Terrans hang out, away from the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, I wait for you and I forgive you. Good night.